Welcome to the Calgary Environmental Roundtable Municipal Election Campaign, led by the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Yeremy. The Calgary Environmental Roundtable, or CERT for short, is a nonpartisan coalition of environmental and climate organizations working together to ensure that water, nature, and climate are front of mind, and that our members have an ongoing opportunity to shape the future of our city. Through our candidate questionnaire, mayoral and ward podcast panels, and voter engagement tool, CERT is connecting residents with candidates, elevating environmental priorities, and empowering Calgarians to make informed choices at the ballot box. Municipal decisions directly affect the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the communities we live in. As Calgary continues to grow, we must prioritize clean water, biodiversity, and bold climate action to ensure a safe and thriving city for generations to come. Our list of supporters is growing. Reach out to add your organization. Send your candidates and network the CERT questionnaire. Encourage their participation and ongoing relationship building with their representatives. Remember to follow, like, subscribe, and share the Gravity Well podcast. Together we can build a resilient, healthy, and sustainable city for all Calgarians.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to have Jim McPhail in the studio with me today. We had some audio issues, which one of our guests you'll meet in a second. We're about to introduce you to two of your Ward 11 candidates, Alex Williams and Kourtney Penner, who you would know already, running for re-election there as well. So Jim is joining me he represents the Calgary Climate Hub in our group of the CERT, so the Calgary Environmental Roundtable. So welcome to the studio, Jim. Take a moment to introduce yourself properly, please. Oh, for some reason I can't hear you. Did you mute yourself? No. Jeez. Yeah. No, still can't hear you. Maybe, yeah, that's so bizarre. You know what? I'll just phone you back on my cell. We'll get you going. All right. This is what going live does. Jim. Okay. Oops. All right. So, yeah, just answer my cell. This is hilarious. You there, Jim? Oh, actually, it seems like your audio is working again.
Hello, you reached the number for Jim. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we sure can.
Oh, I hear you now.
Oh my goodness, hilarious. You're good. Okay, let's regroup.
You need me on the cell?
No, you're good. You are back in action, so let's enjoy it. Excellent. So there's some real life
humor.
All good. Okay, Jim. So I hope you heard me. I was asking you to please take a moment to introduce yourself properly for folks. Tell people about the Climate Hub as well, please.
Okay. Well, the Climate Hub is, I guess, the best well-known climate organization in the city. Lots of people have been doing lots of work in different fields and so on with it. It's been working with various groups inter-organizationally and a strong leadership role there. Lots of work with the city and partnering with them for quite a while. I've been serving with different nodes, as they call them, and committees over the last, probably about 6 years now. Different roles, including the board, do a lot of research behind the scenes for everything. And in terms of the environmental, I realized that my history on that goes back to grade 12, so about 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. And so you're a psychologist by background,
yep,
is that right,
yep.
Jim? Yeah. So what brought you into climate work, do you think?
Oh, well, I mean, it just spun off from the environmental stuff. I got, as I say, it really was back in grade 12. somehow I got hooked and started touring Saskatchewan to different high schools, talking about environment, partly climate. And frankly, it just kind of kicked off from there back when.
Fantastic.
Got more active probably about the last 8 years.
Yeah. So Jim and I had the opportunity to work together with a mutual friend, Bob Morrison, on Sprawl. So there's something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, and I had the pleasure of working with you on that. So thank you.
Yeah, he's a champ.
Yeah. Okay, so back to this program. So we welcome back to the Calgary Environmental Roundtables, Building a Greener Future for Calgary Municipal Election Campaign and podcast mini-series. Thank you to Jeremy Farkas for Mayor, Ali Unwala for Ward 1, Jennifer Winus and Trevor Kavanaugh for Ward 2, Andrew Yule and Jasprina Jahal for Ward 3, DJ Kelly for Ward 4, David Barrett, Anthony Askew, Mike Atkinson for Ward 7, Miguel Cortines for Ward 8, and Harrison Clark, Marina Ortman, and Shirley Perungao for your participation. We've had a tremendous group of people come. There's been wonderful conversations. And in the absence of a Ward 6 conversation, I had a tremendous conversation with Heather McKenzie from Solar Alberta. I encourage folks to check that one out. If you live in Wards 5, 6, 10, or 13, or are rooting for Mayor Gondak, Brian Thiessen, Sonia Sharp, or Jeff Davidson, please reach out to them. Use the QR code in the corner. Get their participation for you. I'm excited today to talk to some of Ward 11 candidates, as we said. Use the QR code, share the QR code, make sure that people get involved. We have just over 50% of the candidates who've participated. Thank you to everyone for your answers. They are on my website, which I will include the links as we get going here. Before we begin, please note the candidates hold a range of environmental positions, priorities, and objectives. This is not a debate. Positions taken by participants, either individually or collectively, do not necessarily represent those of the Calgary Environmental Roundtable as a whole. Again, CERT in this campaign does not endorse or recommend any candidates or political parties. I will do my best to offer some personal endorsements. Lastly, remember to follow, like, and subscribe to the Gravity Well podcast. Make sure that the guests have their voices heard, and also that we together can build a resilient, healthy, sustainable city if we amplify this together. So thank you again. I'm going to now invite on, let's start with Alex. Welcome to the studio, Alex. Happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So Alex helped us with some audio, or got us anyway to a place where we were functioning today. So thank you for that. So Alex was born and raised in Calgary. He's dedicated to making Ward 11 safer, more connected, and an affordable place for people. He's a proud member of the Calgary Party. He works alongside a team committed to practical, people-focused solutions which benefit all Calgarians. And together, he wants to build a strong community where everyone can thrive. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we didn't end up needing kind of the backdoor fix, and that Jim's audio is working now. Hopefully it's working. You can hear us, right, Jim?
I can hear Jenny really, really well. You're a bit faint for me, Alex, but I can make it out what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah. So, Alex, would you mind elaborating? You're a podcast editor, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So professionally, I'm a podcast editor. That's what I do day to day, is sitting here at my desk and making people sound good. I fell into that profession. I had been studying to become a high school social studies teacher. So that's my education background. During COVID, though, of course, things got a little mangled in the plans. And so then I was already putting myself through school doing editing work. And so I just decided to carry on with that. It's given me the opportunity to interview hundreds of people about a wide variety of subjects. One of my personal favorite projects that I worked on that nobody paid me to do, but it was a fun experiment, was the creation stories. I got to interview a Muslim imam, a Christian priest, a Jewish cantor, and an Assyriologist. And so sitting down and hearing diverse perspectives from them was fascinating. So that's something that I'm passionate about, is chatting with people and asking good questions and learning.
I can tell you every conversation is a learning experience. So I definitely appreciate that. And that sounds like an interesting show. I would like a link to that later, please.
I'll share.
You for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very pleased to welcome Kourtney Penner to the stage. Thank you so much for being with us, Kourtney. So prior to being elected in 2021, Kourtney was a community-based volunteer leader, contributing to many initiatives. She has a strong value in building relationships, knows projects are successful when we choose a mindset of working together. She approaches challenges to finding balanced, positive outcomes using data to support decision-making. She's a mom of a teenager and lives in Ward 11. Her parents also live there, so she has a good understanding of the balance needs for all residents in her riding ward. And as a former leader in the tech sector, Kourtney appreciates a thriving economy is vital to our city, and creating a sustainable future is important in our global position. Thank you so much for being here, Kourtney. Welcome to the studio. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Kourtney, sorry.
I did mute myself, so I didn't.
Yes.
I am at that point in the campaign with a sore throat and a tickly throat. So I was having a coughing fit and had muted myself. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. I'm able to have this important conversation today.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to shuffle the stage a little bit here, just make sure we've got Jim set up to lead us off here. So Jim's going to lead us off with our first question. Go ahead, Jim, get us going.
Okay. For both candidates, and I'll ask Alex to reply first, Calgary's climate strategy outlines 5-year goals to reduce energy poverty and utility costs, create clean economy jobs, improve public health, and build more equitable, climate-resilient communities. If elected, how will you work to achieve these outcomes for Calgarians? And just randomly, Alex, if you could start us. Partly it's based on alphanumerical. What do you think?
Yeah, well, on the municipal level, we have a lot of opportunity to take action on climate change and on climate issues. And so actually moving that needle forward, I talk a lot about transit. You'll probably hear me talk a lot about transit. It's one of the things I'm most familiar with and passionate about. But that's one of the ways that we can actually be making a serious impact. A lot of our emissions come from tailpipe emissions, come from transportation, and so if we can support other modes of transportation, that's a big way that we can do that. There are also other things, supporting, preserving some of our natural spaces, some of those ecosystems is a big one, and of course, I know one of my first interactions with the Climate Hub was seeing Steve Bentley at City Council inviting everybody to go plant trees, and so making sure that we take care of the tree canopy that we have, and that's one of those climate action items that I think is most visible to people, and that people, when they see trees being planted, they say, okay, we're doing something about it. So I think there's a broad spectrum of things that we can do that are seriously effective as well as seriously visible.
Wonderful. Kourtney, you're next, please.
Make sure I get myself unmuted this time. Yeah, thank you. So the primary role, we have a climate strategy, Pathways to 2050. The primary role and function of council right now is to make sure that we continue to fund that strategy, and to make sure that we put the funding in budget so that we can continue on that pathway forward. So we've done a great job of identifying both those short, mid, and long-term initiatives that are in there. And so what I would say is, like, if there was something that we could add that lives in that short term, that we aren't implementing yet, it's really specifically around energy poverty. And so especially as we see affordability rates rise, or the affordability crisis come, we need to be addressing energy poverty. And there's lots of partnerships we can do with NMAX on that. There's partnerships we can do with the United Way. One of the things that I did while I was on council, both Councillor Spencer and I worked together to find $10 million to give to the United Way, so people who were struggling with utility bills during especially those high energy price times could get a 1-month relief. So we know it continues to be a struggle. The other part of that is advocacy to the provincial government around energy and energy pricing. That needs to continue to happen from the city and with our partner at NMAX. That's really important for Calgarians. And so energy poverty reduction can look like a lot of things. NMAX has been piloting the load limiter program with really great success. And I think that there's opportunities that we could continue to extend that and work with NMAX on that extension into the rest of the community.
Wonderful. Okay, so from Alex, I heard focusing on what the municipalities can do. There's a lot of opportunity at the municipal level to take climate action. Appreciating that transportation is a key issue to help us get those emissions down and get us moving in the right direction. Preserving those natural spaces, making sure that we are investing in that tree canopy and other initiatives like that. And then Kourtney, you added that you would fund the strategy and make sure that it's budgeted. I heard Mayor Gondak say something that unless it's budgeted, it's not happening. So it's really important that you recognize that. Thank you. And that energy poverty needs to be addressed early and quickly. So thank you so much for bringing that in, and that there is an expectation of council to be advocating with the province and in partnership with NMAX. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so next question, I'll lead in, and Kourtney, you can answer this one first. So how will you ensure that new community development and redevelopment in Calgary protects our watersheds, rivers and creeks, wetlands, and the wildlife and urban diversity who depend on these ecosystems? Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, right? And so, respecting the time and not going deep into anything, we have seen actually through some of the area structure plans in the last 3 years, much better protections of watersheds and thinking about how wildlife moves, how people even move like through green space and connected corridors. And so, traditionally we used to build communities where there was like all these like isolated pockets of green, and we are now seeing that corridor, especially when I look at places like Aurora. So that was just like up in the Nose Creek area, even when we looked south, right next to the Bow River. And so how we are thinking about that integration. Ward 11 specifically has some really neat things that happen in and around it, in particular because we're sort of wrapped around the reservoir. And so as we redevelop, especially around that reservoir, thinking about some of the challenges and issues that we face, and probably one of the number one things that we actually face right now is timely, it's October, is bears. Because bears know it's pumpkin season. And so how do we make sure, right, in development, we're considering for things like garbage can storage? That's the number one thing. But then also so we can have those wildlife interactions and corridors move. We also need to think about, yes, we need to plant trees. Are fruit trees the most opportune thing we need to be planting in North and South Glenmore parks? And the other area that we need to always be mindful of, Carbon Park. It's really a natural area along the Bow River too. And so how we also make sure that we're stabilizing our banks so that we don't get slippage into that is going to be really critical and important too. So we're actually taking on a big project at Sue Higgins Dog Park. It's one of our only river access for dogs, but we were actually losing trees because of the slope slippage. So we're finally doing some stabilization there because I advocated for that and to protect that natural riparian area that surrounds the Bow River on both sides.
Wonderful. Alex?
Yeah, I really like what Kourtney said and agree. And also want to note, like, Andrew Ewell is somebody who's very big on this stuff. He's running in Ward 3. And I know he talks a lot about Nose Creek area up there. And I think in Calgary, we're fortunate to have a lot of these spaces preserved. I think about Fish Creek as a huge place in South Calgary that provides a lot of that wildlife corridor as well as that people corridor too, right? And so protecting spaces like that, but then also as far as, making sure that we use our water resources well as people move to the city. Investing in things like better taps and better toilets and plumbing systems that lose less water. That is a big thing that I know we are thinking about and that we need to continue thinking about as we move forward, so that the people who want to move here can move here without it becoming a carrying capacity issue, right?
Right. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Kourtney, what struck me was you mentioned about the wildlife corridors for people and animals, and that's being planned. And I know that city actually has some specifics already laid out in that area in the initial stages anyway. And then talking about around the reservoir, the fact that things like bears and other wildlife, we have to be careful. It's things like our garbage, as you've mentioned, and we can do that safely. The pumpkins that the bears are going to come love and want to come chew on. And then also the fruit trees people have, because those are very attractive to particularly bears when they're soaking up the carbs. And Carbon Park, talking about protecting the banks and the riparian work that needs to be done there. And so great on that. And then moving trees, mentioning about that also as part of the riparian work to be done. So thank you on that. Alex, you mentioned you agreed with much of what Kourtney said, and also brought in about what Andrew Yule had shared previously. And that, again, people and animal corridors. You did talk to water conservation in terms of some more planning around toilets and taps, the carrying capacity, as you mentioned too. So quite impressed. Thank you both.
Wonderful. Go ahead and follow with the next question, Jim.
Alrighty. Kourtney. Oh, wait a minute. Do I keep going with Andrew first? I guess so.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Alternate. So Andrew and Kourtney, in turn, will you commit to dedicating budget dollars towards protecting Calgary's biodiversity and improving wildlife safety in our urban environment? And we've heard a bit about that already, but also including measures such as enforcing bird-friendly building standards, retrofitting existing structures, and supporting safe wildlife corridors. And both of you have anticipated this, but let's go for more. So Alex?
Yeah. You can call me whatever you like, as long as I know you're talking to me. I'm pretty easy. As far as wildlife corridors go, and actually committing, budget dollars to supporting projects like that, I think that's important. I know Brian Pincott and others have said things like, if you want to know what a city's priorities are, look in the budget. And if we're serious about something, it should be budgeted for, and it should be something that we're presenting in that way and backing up, putting our money where our mouth is, right? And so, that is something that I do support. How we can do that, I don't have a concrete specific that I could give you today, but I know there are a lot of already, not-for-profit groups and organizations that do things like that to support wildlife. I know Inglewood Bird Sanctuary is a great example of a place in the city where is like huge support for biodiversity. You can go there all year long and see different species who are using it as a way station to travel wherever they're going to nest, to live, to stop off. And so supporting things like that is a big one, because it's not just people that live here.
Wonderful. Kourtney?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things. I mean, I'm sometimes known as the bird lady because I brought forward the city bird, and as much as I get flack for it, I'll also say it was like one of our highest engagements ever, and engaged school children. And so when we think about wildlife, it actually is something that is really one of those uniting factors for Calgarians, and something that we all really value. And so when we do invest into wildlife conservation and preservation, it is something that actually brings people together. And so I think doing more of it is a good thing. So Ward 11 specifically, obviously we have Weaselhead Preservation Society, and they're doing a lot of great work down there, and have been working to partner them better with the city on how we kind of co-conserve that area, and how we can think about bylaw enforcement down there so that we are protecting that natural and very important space. Because while it's also important for animals, it's actually one of our most important things for our watershed, because all of the willows and the plants and the trees down there do that beginning filtration process from all of that upstream junk that can happen, right? I mean, we have very great water in Calgary. We have amazing water, but that's a really important place for not only the watershed. I would say we have ways to go with respect to bird-friendly policy, and I think should be looking at targeted locations where birds are, and where birds are kind of co-locating. So whether it's Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, whether it's around the reservoir, being really specific and targeted in our bird-friendly strategy is going to be really key for success. And so, had Glenmore Landing passed, right, that would have been a place where like applying, bird-friendly building principles would have been really vital. And of course, like a lot of that happens at the development permit stage, but not often when we start to talk at the beginning. So again, case by case basis, lots of good ways to do that.
Awesome. Okay. So first of all, Alex, you spoke about what's budgeted for is really what happens. So thank you for acknowledging that, the importance of making sure we budget for these things. And, acknowledging that you don't need to be an expert as a counselor, but perhaps understand that you have to lean into the people that are the experts and listen to their respect there. I mean, maybe I'm speaking for CERT when I say that, but we have a lot to offer you. So there are a lot of groups out there, and not just our groups, that can certainly support your knowledge in that way. Kourtney, you brought in, that it does unite us. We all really do enjoy preserving and prolonging and conserving our wetlands and our special spaces. Weaselhead Park is really remarkable. And like you said, it's vital for that watershed health, for it to be considered and thriving. And then thank you for acknowledging the bird-friendly standards opportunities. I think from these conversations, we had, Kathleen Johnson of Urban Species Response in here. She's one of our members, and she explained to me that only 1% of strikes happen downtown Calgary. I had no idea. So yeah, I think even just an education for people before they undertake getting new windows, to make sure that they do take seriously those strikes. They all matter. So thank you so much for bringing that into view and hopefully generating some policy around it. Okay, next question. So our next question is around NMAX. No, it is not. What steps will you take to ensure that housing, rent, and transit in Calgary are affordable and accessible, so that more Calgarians can access services with dignity and live and work in a healthy city? And yes, Kourtney, you'll lead this one, please.
Thanks. These often go hand in hand. So there's a couple things around housing and housing near transit in particular. So our most valuable land in the city, other than the downtown core, is around transit, like from a property values perspective. So in some ways, it makes it more expensive to develop around transit. But in terms of sort of like the overall cost benefit from a long term, it's really, really great. And so when I think about the projects that are happening in Ward 11, whether it be, around Heritage Station or future plans for CMLC to develop around Anderson Station, these are all really positive things and a great use of our land in order to create that uplift. And we know when, Economics 101 is very much supply and demand. So if you look, this council has been really proactive and great at adding a ton of stock into the market. And so we are seeing rent prices decrease and vacancies go up, which is helping ease some of those pressures. Of course, always affordable housing in and around transit is really important. And we're not talking necessarily just like housing affordability, which is like cost of housing compared to your income, that true affordable housing, which is that below market with your nonprofit housing providers. And then I think the spillover from that is protecting low-income transit paths. And there's a couple indicators around low-income transit paths that we need to be really mindful of. And I think some policy we need to decouple. So if we were to raise transit fares, like for a regular fare provider, low income is always a percentage of that. But then if you were to, like, let's say, raise it by 5% or 10% even for like a regular fare user, it almost creates a 25 to 50% bump sometimes for low income because of that ratio. And so we need to decouple those two policies. That's going to be really important for transit affordability, and something I've been looking at and talking with transit already, and want to make sure that we, if we were to improve a fare increase, let's say in this November budget, that it's only applicable to regular transit fares, and the low income has to stay. And so I've been really advocating to keep that and would continue to do it. And again, with that comes that additional advocacy to the province to fund their share or fund all of it.
Wonderful. Alex?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that Kourtney just said. I think especially she hit it on the head talking about the opportunity cost of the land around our transit, right? It is expensive to develop there, but the benefits that we get from developing there are huge, right? Especially with, fare box revenue increases, with the property tax uplift that comes from developing those spaces. And we are fortunate in Ward 11 to have a lot of opportunities where we can be doing that. Along the red line, especially because that's already built, but then the green line, which is under construction now, and taking advantage of the opportunities that then we see in Quarry Park and Douglas Glen and Riverbend. And so trying to tackle those together is pretty critical. I myself, I use transit daily. That's my primary mode of getting around the city, and so that's one of the big reasons why I'm running for city council, is to be a voice for that specific need on council. Somebody who's intimately familiar with that need, and obviously, you know, I hear it all the time when I mention that I'm a transit user. People say, well, you know, you don't have kids to take to hockey practice. That's true. I don't. If I had kids to take to hockey practice, I would also have a vehicle. But I think thinking about transit and trying to expand the sphere of people who can use it, is a big deal, and that can help tackle those expensive transportation costs. And then on housing, making sure that we have supportive housing options, affordable housing options, and making sure that these spaces in our city provide a variety of housing options, not just a single option. And so there's a lot of energy to be focused on that, and I'm optimistic that the next city council will be able to continue that work.
Okie dokie. So, Kourtney, you mentioned that the development around transit centers, if you will, and lines can be more expensive. And it's true, but at the same time, the city's been effective adding units. And so, in fact, that by doing that and providing more stock, prices have managed then to be brought down that way. And then allowing then for some nonprofit work units to be able to be brought in too. You mentioned about the transit pass, and one key point that where the city has two portions coupled together right now. So if they give a quantum, say $5 per pass, that's percentage-wise for the low-income people, that's quite a bit more for them to try to afford. And so you're talking about getting to decouple that side of it. And the interesting question of, can we get the province then to pay their share, as in all of it, on the transit side? So I appreciate that too. Okay, Alex, again, you agreed with what Kourtney has to say. That's very clever of you to do, because she has a lot of good things to say, and I'm glad that that's part of what you believe too. The benefits of co-locating transit and lots of development makes a lot of sense. For you mentioned too about, for instance, and you said around the red line and green line to come. You mentioned Quarry Park and Riverbend, Douglas. So the whole thing about trying to, as a transit user, bring your voice to the council, that I'm somebody who knows this intimately. And so here are some of the issues to be considered. And that, yeah, you did mention, okay, yeah, down the road, you know, there might be babies coming along and transit is, may not be suitable, but you're able to at this point. And then you mentioned too that it's worthwhile for the city to increase affordable housing options. And so you'd be trying to emphasize that with the council. So thank you for both. Appreciate the both. And I think, Jenny, you're saying?
Oh, go ahead. Next question. Yeah, you were ready. Go for it.
Okay. Jenny wanted to ask this, but I get to anyway about NMAX. So Alex and Kourtney, but Alex first again, NMAX is wholly owned by the City of Calgary. What role do you see for NMAX in helping the City of Calgary achieve its 2035 clean electricity goals?
Yeah. I mean, as an organization that is a little bit more arm's length from the city, I see a little bit more potential for NMAX to be taking action on those things. Of course, still beholden to the city, still wholly owned by the city. I mean, we already have some great solar farms in the city. Calgary is an amazing place if you want to use solar energy, and wind energy as well. So I see a lot of opportunity there. I'm not as familiar with the specifics of NMAX, so I'll not speak out of turn, and I'll listen to what people smarter than me have to say.
Excellent. Kourtney.
Yeah, the energy environment is not super straightforward in Alberta, right? It's not as simple as like, oh, I wish to do this, therefore I do. There is through Utility Commission and the Energy Regulator, there are a lot of like constraints around energy transition. And I also think, acknowledging that we, have a provincial government, which is kind of the oversight of those two bodies, which hasn't wholly delved into the opportunities for transition either. And so that makes the environment around transition even more difficult, pushing against like federal goals. And so, what NMAX is taking on is deeply ambitious. And so I actually think the primary role of council in this is to stand behind NMAX and their initiatives and their goals and champion their ability to do it, because it's actually, they have the ability to do it in a regulated environment should they be given permission to do it. It's not that we can't, it's just how do we do that? And so it's going to continue to take like dedicated conversations alongside NMAX in order to make that transition. There's already great work that is happening. Good work happening with Shepherd, and even just like the carbon capture that comes off of Shepherd that other companies are using. There's a lot of really neat technology. So it's not even just thinking about NMAX being net neutral. It's like, how do they help other people be net neutral as well in a more integrated system? So there's really the biggest piece around NMAX for me is advocacy and proof of concept.
Wonderful. Okay, so from you, Alex, first I heard you talk about there's a really big opportunity, again, acknowledging that we own this asset. This is something that we should look to being leaders. And as Kourtney got into, support them in being leaders in the clean electricity transition. No, it's not straightforward and easy. There are a lot of things that need to come together to help this transition happen. And thank you for acknowledging, Kourtney, that it's going to need to be standing with NMAX to help those things happen. Bob Hawksworth, who is a former councillor, brought this into my view about how we could use the heat waste from and the carbon waste from NMAX to build or to grow local food sources. There's a lot of opportunity in what they're doing, even if it isn't as clean as it could be, but there are big opportunities there. So thank you for acknowledging those opportunities as well, Kourtney. Okay, so next question is around advancing water sustainability. So how will you advance sustainable water use and watershed protection in Calgary's growth and development decisions? Kourtney first, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Alex actually touched on it earlier, very rightly so. So things like low flow faucets and shower heads, toilets, these are things. And so as a city, thinking about when we do facilities, making sure that we are, upgrading and retrofitting those things. One of the programs we have, so CEEP, so the Clean Energy Improvement Program, talks often about windows and solar. If there is a way, and this could be advocacy again across the entire province for things like low flow shower heads, because we know for so many people, solar or windows, especially even if you're a renter, maybe isn't possible, but you could change out other things like faucets to help with your own one, you could help with your own bill, but then two, you're just like removing less water, from the watershed, which we know is precarious. It's very precarious in Calgary. So in June of this year, we were likely to put water restrictions in, a month later, we are like, how are we going to deal with all this water? And now all of the grass and weeds are growing and we're having to mow even more. And so that is just how precarious the water is here in Calgary. And so we always have to be mindful of that. But I think expanding programs to, beyond kind of the obvious. And so water is a really good one. Again, protecting areas upstream and how we both use our water. We're one of the few places that does allow recreation on our water. And that's a really good thing for Calgarians. But we also need to be mindful of like what are the impacts that has like on a quality perspective. Continuing to partner with the province around water is important too. We know there's always that interplay there. I hate to bring them into everything, but this really shows you the complexity of the decisions we make, and we don't make it unilaterally because we are also mindful of what's happening upstream in our municipalities that we support upstream on the Bow River and downstream as well. And so these are important conversations to also have in partnership with them around that watershed protection. The other thing that I would just, mention when it comes to water is we didn't go into water restrictions this year, but there are many municipalities, and Okotoks is a really good example of it, where they just have permanent water restrictions. And I do think that is something we need to start phasing in, is those permanent water restrictions that happen year over year so that Calgarians get used to it. And so that when we are in those precarious situations, it feels second nature and it doesn't feel hard to shift our habits. So we need to be building better habits now. And it has been discussed about, do we do water restrictions in the rotation? And I don't think there was the will or the appetite on council last time. And my hope would be that there is, this council going forward because we need to, again, we know habits are hard to form. So that would be the one that I would hope to see sooner than later.
Wonderful. Alex?
Yeah, just like in a lot of things, I think there are cultural shifts that need to happen. The way that we expect ourselves to shower, how long, how much, being a little bit more water conscious and making sure that we're building a resilient city. Because of course, like Kourtney mentioned, there are people upstream and downstream who rely on this same watershed as us, and so I think that's really important. If anybody wants like a book recommendation on water in the Western United States, specifically Cadillac Desert, is well worth a read. Something I also think a lot about is like our landscaping and how we think about our landscaping, how we think about our parks. And I believe Kourtney brought forward a notice of motion to do a lot more kind of naturalization of these spaces, which I think is fantastic, which I hope the next council brings up again. Because it is important, I think, not just from a sustainability perspective, but also a beauty perspective. I think incorporating a lot of natural grasses, landscapes, flowers is also very good for biodiversity as well as for just the beauty of the city. I think that's worth it. And so supporting programs at the city, like making sure that people have access to seeds for those sorts of plants, that they can implement those in their gardens. Making sure that our bylaws are favorable to that sort of planting, I think, is critical. And then, like Kourtney said, this is also an affordability issue. If we can have more efficient houses that can help us reduce the cost of our utilities and help us reduce our water usage, as well as our heat usage and everything else. I'm glad Kourtney mentioned windows. I remember growing up, we had double pane windows in one house, and then when we moved, the next house had triple pane windows. And I remember my mom talking about how crazy the savings were. And so I think those are really critical for creating a more resilient city as well as a more affordable city.
Alrighty. Sunny, Kourtney mentioned already about Alex having brought up the whole thing about the use of water within the houses that for the citizens, toilets and tanks and whatnot, and retrofits would be useful. And that she also mentioned that this could be part of other programs. I know with the subsidies that have been given for people who are looking at upgrading their homes. So that could be tied in with not just the solar, wind aspects, insulation aspects, but that in fact the water part could be useful to include that with those programs. And that way you can expand then on the objectives across the board. You mentioned too that, Kourtney, that the whole thing about Calgary having impacts on the water from the development choices that they've made, and how not just immediately like the riparian side, but how much water is being used, the access to it, what it does to flow and so on. And the possibility of this relates to provincial involvement, as it does for so many things related to the city's work. And so looking at upstream and downstream partnerships, the watershed protection going, in fact, up and downstream of Calgary. And what was interesting too that you pointed out with Okotoks. In fact, they've had water restriction. I know that they've had to be bringing in water because of the restrictions, and that this also perhaps allows the possibility of considering for Calgary that we might have something like rotating restrictions to get people used to the idea that this is not something where it's just, oh, we've had a bad year or two. It's like, you know what? As we know with climate change, it's like, it's coming, folks, and it's here. And so do we need to get people aware of this? It's not just, okay, we had terrible mains break and so on, but we're going to be having more and more of this. And so get people used to the idea and how then we can actually make changes from the city with aid, but also for people's consciousness. Alex mentioned too then about, as you mentioned, about the shifting with different residential sides of things and his awareness too about upstream, downstream issues. He also brought in the idea of what about the landscaping that we do, both the city with its parks and what it plants. And so, for instance, a lot of grass and stuff like that. Okay, nice. But do we have to look more at some of the natural plantings that in fact survive our climate and evolving climate better than what we prefer because, oh, the grass looks nice, but isn't necessarily natural. Also, you had mentioned, Alex, but the biodiversity that can be considered with that. We have a lot more. And I'll toss in here too, if we were using more of the natural plants, the ones already accustomed to the ecosystems here, that would also mean that we'd be seeing a whole lot more in the way of the animals, plants, and developing ecosystems, the insects, et cetera, that would come along with that. And funny thing, yeah, because you mentioned about the beauty of them too. A different topic there. I appreciate that. Also, the part about the affordability, because for people's own gardens, if the city's modeling it and making, say, the different, I know they make certain trees available and so on, but can we have people start to develop the idea of, okay, what would it look like to use, well, like xeriscaping? You know, if they start to actually work with their own gardens in a way that supports this. So appreciate both your comments covering a lot of range there. So thank you.
Awesome, Jim. Ask the final question for these guys. And actually, while we're at it, why don't you also offer anything else you want to say that wasn't covered by these questions when you get your chance to speak? Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. So, Alex and Kourtney, how will you ensure recommendations from Calgarians, including residents, frontline communities, environmental groups, and city staff, are meaningfully considered in council decisions?
Yeah. Well, I think the primary role of a city councilor is to consult with people. You do a lot of chatting with interest groups, with individuals from the ward, with city administration, and so making sure that we're asking a lot of questions, getting deep into these issues, and kind of exploring them. Everybody on council comes to it with different expertise and different experiences. On, as far as planting things go for the environment, my mom would be a much better person to talk to about that sort of thing, right? She's got an amazing garden. As far as transit, like that is something that I'm very passionate about. And so making sure that we're listening, available to listen, available to have those conversations with folks is kind of ultimately critical. And then being able to sift through that information and sort out what can we accomplish today, what can we do today to make tomorrow better. And since you mentioned as well, taking the opportunity to highlight some things that weren't covered in this conversation, as we're talking about the environment and the city, we didn't talk much about active mobility, but that's something that I'm hugely passionate about, as well, is making sure that no matter your age, no matter your ability, that you're able to get around the city, whether that's walking, biking, driving, taking transit, you should have those options. And fostering that active mobility is good for the climate, it's good for our health. And in Calgary, having over 300 days of sunshine here, and having these amazing park spaces that we have, like down by Carbon Park, like the reservoir, and these amazing connective paths that we have, building on that to better support that action both from a climate lens, but also, health, fun, transportation, all of those other things that tie into that as well. And I think that's what I'd like to leave people with, is that when we talk about the climate, we're talking about building a resilient city, not just from an environmental standpoint, but also from like a fiscal standpoint, right? These costs are going to mount. If we don't do something about it today, it's going to cost us so much more down the line. And all of these systems are intertwined. And I think through this conversation, with the four of us here, we've been able to weed that out a little bit and bring that to the forefront. So hopefully, people are also thinking about that this election and going forward.
Awesome. Kourtney?
Thanks. First, I just want to say thanks to Alex. This is like a lovely civil conversation where we're riffing off each other, and just, I think in the spirit of trying to keep our answers, tight and tidy, we both kind of covered like so much, and really, I don't think we disagree on like those all the amazing pathways that we could take forward with respect to climate. One thing I do want to give a shout out to is we do have our citizen advisory committees, and they're called council advisory committees. I would love to rename them, but we do have our climate one. And that has now become a merge of the Climate Advisory Committee and the Biodiversity Committee merged, because we can see even from this conversation, like they're so entwined in each other. And so it was really important for me to merge those two committees so that they could be working in tandem, like in specialties in tandem. And I do think we have so many citizen specialists, right? You have a committee of 16 people, but that is just like a fraction of the citizen specialists. And like when I even look at like who is all a part of CERT, right? And all the different, groups that lead into CERT, really important. One of the things I think we really need to break down is how citizens can get engaged in climate initiatives and supporting the climate initiatives we have in the city. And whether that is, tree planting, biodiversity and naturalization, boulevarding, food security, we need to de-risk the city in that sense, or we need to be less afraid of risk so that residents can get involved and get engaged. When they don't feel like they have ownership over the city and ownership over the outcomes that can happen. And so we've been pushing really hard on some of that, and we are making some progress, but it is still tricky. So that is definitely something that we need to be doing more of. I think like final comments that I would offer is that, we didn't touch a lot on tree canopy, but we have challenges with the tree canopy, and we know that. I would also say Calgary is, when you look at all evidence, is actually a desert. And so trees are great because they offer a lot of things like shade and value and those things, but they are really difficult to grow here. So being a little bit more clear on what are the species we should be planting. So rather than ornamental trees, we need to be planting the species that do well. I think we need to rethink as a city how we plant. We're getting better at how we plant trees. We used to be like, let's plant them all in a row, but like that's not naturally how trees grow, and they like to clump, and like trees and those like concrete wells, and they can't talk to each other. Like we can be better, but I think we need to also really continue to consider how, again, native grass species, shrubs, bushes are so important as part of the biodiversity for one, the natural like birds, like and bees and flora and fauna that are here that they rely on, but also from that carbon sink perspective and just their ability to take hold and take root, literally deeper roots, right? When we think about spray grass, it's like this roots deep, natural prairie grasses, you get these amazing long roots. And again, like Alex touched on, the biodiversity, like look at how beautiful Nose Hill is at all times of the year because of that. So again, also making sure that when we're having the conversations around climate and carbon capture and the importance of green things in our city, like whether it's lawns or trees, that we think more than just trees. Trees are really critical for shade and on properties, but roadways and things like that, we have to do it different, right? So I think it's also about working with what we have, as opposed to trying to kind of fight to get things that are really hard to take hold and really costly to take hold, right? Planting trees here requires a ton of water. So how can we be pro water conservation and then planting tree species that take a lot of water to establish? And so we have to have those honest conversations with Calgarians as well about what you're asking for and the realistic expectations.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for running. It is just such a pleasure to have people that, number one, appreciate the importance of natural services in our city, and the appreciation of, what it takes to have actually drive change. Like, Alex, you brought in the concept, and Jim, I'm going to let you offer some final comments when I'm done here too. You brought in, again, transit and active mobility. It's just so interesting to realize through these conversations, even like we are nature. So if nature's free to roam, we're free to roam. And just that understanding that link between the two, and our health is concurrent with their health. And just appreciating that we are a sunny city, and being able to embrace that together is just so wonderful. And that investing today will make a big difference for us in the future, that we do have to sort of bite the bullet, if you will, in some ways, and start realizing the importance of investing in these things and those long-term returns. Kourtney, you got into de-risking. Thank you for talking about that. Calgary needs, like, if you think about trees, I know you talked about canopy, and there's some things around that, and hail, the ability for us to mitigate hail damage would have been tremendous. You look at the areas that got hit and they didn't have that tree canopy. It goes hand in hand. But also, my husband has done a renaturalization project on the ring road here, and we've never been able to grow anything until we allowed that biodiversity to come in with it. And the importance of planting native and all of those things really do make it come so much further. So thank you for bringing that in. And the importance of us remembering that we are a grassland area, and that we need to reinvest in those natural grasslands, which have a huge climate impact when they are invested in, because again, they will. And actually, one of the conversations we had with Andrew Yule was around how certain bird species cannot nest in those trees, and we have to be conscious about where we're planting and why. So thank you both. I'm so grateful that you both are running for the city. Kourtney, thank you again, both of you, for understanding the importance and responsibility of a city councillor. And I appreciate you stepping back in, Kourtney, and you stepping up, Alex. Awesome. Okay, we'll let you guys, or actually, Jim, do you want to offer some final comments before we let these guys go?
Thank you. I really appreciate both you being able to take larger point of view on things. And Jenny's already alluded to that, to larger systems. So Kourtney, for instance, you looking geographically about looking at, okay, up and downstream. We're not just Calgary looking after its own water. We actually share it, and we have a commitment that a certain amount of water has to go through. And how do we work with the municipality, district of Calgary, and so on, that to work with others to action? And then within that, how are we going to be actually able to survive? And if the water doesn't come to us, what's that going to mean in the future? I guess part of it too, Jenny's been mentioning too, and both of you, but frankly, we're close in, the Palliser Triangle was never actually some place that was recommended to do anything with agriculture. And it's extremely expensive in all sorts of ways, not just money, but effort and so on. If we're actually trying to go against, hey, here's what, if you will, Mother Nature and so on are actually saying. And so it's uphill battle, and we don't have to do it that way. That, in fact, it can be quite beautiful to be going with nature's side. And I appreciate that both of you actually mentioned on this, down to the small scale too, that there are certain bylaws that just a bit of tweaking here and there can make a big difference for what people find acceptable and what they're able to do. I've got that, frankly, outside here, where the boulevard outside the house, it's like, I don't get to plant gorgeous stuff on there, except actually the latest bylaw says I could put something in temporarily, but come October, it has to go out. And it's like, oh, so it's just going to be the grass there? Like, come on, guys, I'm willing to do a lot more than that. So bylaw changes, slight differences can make an enormous difference in all sorts of ways. So I appreciate up and down scale on that. So thank you so very much. Appreciate the approach for both of you.
Yeah, so much appreciate the bylaw piece coming into this. Okay, we'll let you guys get back to it. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. Have a great rest of your campaign.
Bye. Yes, enjoy. All the best.
Okay, Jim, thank you again for being here with me. I really appreciate it.
I'm open to others. I saw that the Thursday one's canceled.
Sorry, Jim, we're still live. So I'm just going to
Oh.
wrap up with some comments here. So
Okay, sorry.
yeah, no, all good. So candidates are joining us to share their vision. The campaign to identify priorities and inform voters will be most successful because of you. So please use the QR code in the corner, as we've said. I've also put some links in the chat for you. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Gravity Well. Get these candidates' messages out to their communities as well, so we make an informed choice at the ballot box. Together, we will build a resilient and healthy, sustainable city for all Calgarians. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.